Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the first ever Fireside Chat that Zilingo Factory is organizing. And the topic for today, as everyone can see on the screen, is adapting to the changes in apparel manufacturing. To the people who have not heard about Zilingo Factory is basically an end-to-end solution provider for apparel manufacturing facilities, which helps in improving the efficiency and the DHU side. We are a software provider, and we have been trying to figure out a way to how to give back to the community by bringing experienced leader onto the forefront and getting them to share their knowledge of how they have brought on change onto the supply chain of this particular industry. And in regards to that, we have kept the topic today as adapting changes in apparel manufacturing. This exclusively created Fireside Chat is focused on helping the community of apparel manufacturers in dealing with the changes that are currently posed to them because of the last few years that we have seen in the industry. This session, we are hoping, will help you to understand in detail how to manage and get the best out of the changes in the apparel industry. Before we proceed, I'll just quickly introduce myself. I'm Anuj. I head this business for Zilingo Factory. And before we get into the introduction of the speakers that are for today, I'll just give a couple of quick instructions which are there. One, everyone will be on mute for the webinar so that we can minimize the audio disturbances for the speakers. If you have any questions or you would like to raise any point, there is a chat window on the right-hand side of the screen. You can definitely put in your points or your questions over there. We'll come to them at the end of the session. You can also go onto LinkedIn and use the hashtag Zilingo Hotline if you want to comment on the Fireside Chat. We'll get through that as well. The last part is that I will just quickly give an overview of how it is going to be structured for the next 45 minutes. I'll basically introduce the speakers over the next couple of minutes and then get to the exciting part where Aadi and Mr. Shirendra will be taking you through the topic and discussing few critical aspects of that. And once we'll try to do that for 30 to 35 minutes. And once we are done with the initial chat and the questions, conversation between Mr. Aadi and Mr. Shirendra, we'll move on to the questions where we'll look at the questions that have come in during the session, and we'll try to answer them towards the end of the overall session. On this note, introducing the inspiring change leaders that we have today with us. We have with us Mr. Shirendra Lawrence, Director at MES Holdings. He is an apparel industry veteran and is the Deputy Chairman for Sri Lanka Apparel Exporters Association. He's also the Director at MES Holdings. Mr. Shirendra holds a mechanical engineering honors degree from Imperial College, University of London, and he is a chartered mechanical engineer. He counts over 35 years of experience in the manufacturing, business development, and organizational leadership in UK and Sri Lanka. Any introduction for him is pretty less. Most of you would be knowing him through the various leadership positions that he has held over the last 35 years. Along with him, we have Mr. Aadi Vaidya, CEO at Zilingo. Aadi has been an advocate for sustainable fashion, and his team has served over 25,000 SMEs, many digitizing for the first time. He also leads a program enabling international brands to procure directly from organic cotton producers in Asia. Aadi is one of the founding team members at Zilingo. Aadi started his career as a banker before taking the plunge into the startup space, where at Zilingo, he started setting up businesses in Thailand and Indonesia, and then moved to Singapore as a chief operating officer, and has been instrumental in putting Zilingo on the world map as we all see today. Aadi basically envisions Zilingo to be a revolutionary single-step platform for merchants, manufacturers, brands, from sourcing to design to production to logistics, insurance, and financing. So that's a very quick introduction of two of our esteemed change leaders that who are with us. diving a little into the topic, I'm sure that most of you who are there on this particular chat would agree that the last 3 to 4 years have been pretty challenging, if not too much challenging. None of us were either anticipating or were trained for the situation. We all basically started working towards it in as we come and go kind of a mode. And that's the reason where we thought that we need to have this chat where we hear from experts and understand how do we adapt to the changes that keep on happening on a day-to-day basis or a more strategic basis as well. So without further ado, I'd like to hand over to Aadi to set the context and share his views on the topic, and then further continue the fireside chat with Mr. Shirendra. Over to you, Aadi.
Thanks, Anuj. Thanks a lot for setting the context, and welcome to everyone here on the Fireside Chat being organized by Zilingo Factory and the team. First of all, thanks a lot to Mr. Shirendra for being here with us today. It's an honor, sir, to have you here on the chat with us, and I'm sure that all the people on this group on this session today will learn a lot and benefit from your immense experience in the industry. So thank you once again for being here with us. I think without wasting too much time, I'll probably say a couple of lines and set some context, and I think it'll be more important to hear from Mr. Shirendra today rather than from me. But I think the most important context of the chat or of the industry in today's world is that fashion is a $3 trillion industry. And unlike, say, electronics or unlike, say, FMCG or pharmaceuticals, it's one of those industries which is probably marred a lot by middlemen, marred a lot by inefficiencies, marred a lot by lack of technology. And those are some of the things which have started happening over the last few years, over the last decade or so. There are stalwarts in the industry like MS in Sri Lanka and other groups across the world who have tried doing their bit in this particular piece. But I think with what happened with COVID, where the entire industry suffered as a whole, the importance of technology, the importance of innovation, the importance of moving forward became more and more apparent. And that is the whole idea and objective of our chat today, to discuss with Mr. Shirendra how the industry evolved over the last few years, how he thinks, let's say, the impact of COVID was on the industry and other such external factors, and how he sees this industry going forward. So yeah, I think without much ado, I would welcome Mr. Shirendra on the call. Hello, Shirendra. Thanks for being here with us.
Hi, Aadi. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me on the call. And of course, hi to all the participants who've very appreciative that you've given up your time on this afternoon to be with us. So thanks. Yeah, very happy to be here. Thank you.
Lovely. So I think with whatever time that has been given to us, we don't have a lot of time. So I'll just quickly dive into the topic and the conversation. So Shirendra, the first thing that I think I would ask you before we deep dive too much into the nitty-gritties of the topic is, what has been your experience of the global apparel manufacturing industry evolving over the last few years? And maybe it would be good to set context in terms of how it evolved over the last, say, 5-10 years versus what the evolution was over the last 30-40 years, because we keep hearing that the evolution was much faster in the last decade. So we'd love to see a bit more color on that from your side.
Sure. Happy to try and set some context, Aadi. So I think if we reflect on the evolution of the industry, the clothing, and of course we take it all for granted, is perhaps one of the oldest and most important industries that we have in history. I mean, as long as man or woman has been in existence, there's been a need for clothing. And probably if you go back to sort of clothing as we know it, the earliest materials used was probably leather, and there is actually evidence of needles being made from bird bones as far back as 50,000 BC. So it's been around for a long time, but probably from a manufacturing perspective, our discussion starts back as far as the Industrial Revolution around the 1800s. Because from that point onwards, the industry evolved through mechanization, starting from yarn and fabric, and then obviously through the invention of sewing machines and so on. But if you then jump much closer to time, 30, 40 years ago, 3-4 decades back, you really can see the evolution since then, because at that time, design and development was still by and large manual, pencils, drawing boards, all of that stuff. And then we saw that sort of development of mass production requiring sort of more complex patterns, and it was all done manually. But we saw the market wanting design changes, seasonal changes. But at that time, machinery and everything was still very mechanical, and planning and the way you designed everything was manual. But then if you run up closer to the millennium, 20, 25, 30 years ago, that's when things really started moving at a crazy pace. Technology for sure had a significant impact on this. The design transition from manual to initially digitizing of the craftsman's handwork, and then moving on from there to digital software designs. And today we talk about virtual design. On the planning side, we've moved from manual planning on pieces of paper to complex spreadsheets and into custom planning solutions that you can buy and install and integrate with your ERP systems. The whole material piece has changed radically. Raw materials were coming in at the, if you like, at the turn of the millennium, barcoded. We have digital inspection systems, some automation in warehouse management systems. And then on the production side, we moved to sort of digital lay planning, automated laying and cutting machinery. And of course, sewing machines started including electronic control systems for ease of setup and also for consistency of sewing operations and quality. And then if you take the last decade, what has really happened, it's all about rapid advancement of technology. The whole process of automation now of customer orders coming into manufacturing or supply chain partners into their management systems. We have raw material orders being placed also through using technology, and we have tracking systems, and we expect our supply chain partners to log into our portals so that we can see what's going on in their systems. We have large-scale adoption of technology to automate manufacturing, and manufacturing itself has just progressed leaps and bounds. The automation of the manufacturing process has happened to some extent, where perhaps people make to stock rather than for high volume products rather than make to order. But I think the biggest shift, Aadi, that we've seen over the last 2 decades is more in the way the relationships have evolved. We used to be in the supply chain, it used to be very transactional, tactical between customers and manufacturers. But today, larger scale manufacturers have become trusted partners with the brands and retailers working on end-to-end solutions to help them to do a better job. And the smaller and medium scale manufacturers have also evolved in that time to be value-adding partners to the bigger solutions providers, providing specialized services and so on. And all of this is really how things have moved on. And it's been necessitated by to support the consumer trends that continue to evolve and the expectations on the brands.
Wonderful. Yeah, no, that makes absolute sense. And frankly, I was actually going to ask you a little bit about the piece around, you mentioned supply chain partners rather than mentioning factories or order fulfillment partners. But I think you broadly covered that piece as such, because over time, as you rightly mentioned, it has become more of a relationship-driven partnership game than just being someone who's, delivering an order. And I think whether large or small factories, that is the philosophy towards which I guess everyone needs to move on. One of the questions I would like to ask Shirendra is that what have you seen with this whole Industry 4.0 revolution now coming in? And Anuj, as he mentioned earlier in the introduction, Zilingo itself is an Industry 4.0 solution. So this whole digitization and Industry 4.0 piece, which is very different, of course, from what happened during Industrial Revolution where machines came in. What is this new thing that is coming in, and in what way do you think it is shaping the future of our industry?
Well, I think as far as the 4th generation of the Industrial Revolution goes and the expectations and or how we see it, from the apparel industry, I'd say it's an evolution that factories or supply chain partners are looking now into the factory of the future, what it could look like. Brands are tying up with them in this process. Some of the work has been done, digitalization of design, development, we mentioned that a little bit a moment ago, and so on in the whole process. But I think it's an industry that will have challenges to adapt to certain aspects of what it would be needed, and some research suggests that you may need to rethink the entire process if you really want to evolve to what we expect. There's a lot of work still to be done in the supply chain. There's a lot of work to be done on the intelligence side of machinery. And as we do this, the consumer expectations are changing. So I'm not so sure that it's a point in time that we'll get there. I think it's a journey, and we'll probably pass through it at some point. But it's work in progress, Aadi.
Got it. No, fair enough. I think shifting gears a little bit, right, and talking a little bit more about the customer expectation. And we talk about when, there used to be 3 seasons a year and you have 3 collections coming out, 3-4 seasons a year. Then you had the likes of Zara and H&M coming in and disrupting that whole concept and turning it upside down. And then you started having, Zara and H&M doing 1 season a month or even more sometimes. And you were having 12, 13, 14, 15 collections every year. And now you have guys, which now we call the real-time fashion guys, right? The Sheins of the world, and recently Shein announced that they're raising around at $100 billion valuation, which will make them a bigger company than Zara and Inditex. That is all being driven by change in customer expectation. And that is happening, because Instagrams of the world and TikToks of the world are actually driving a lot of what customer really wants to see. And as the pop culture is becoming more and more effervescent, so is the demand for newer and newer style and SKUs. So in this era of real-time fashion, really, where people are asking for faster designs, people are asking for lower MOQs, people are asking for more Instagram-driven trends. Let me put it that way. How should factories and supply chain partners deal with that, and what is it that they need to do to move in a direction which starts making them more and more competitive in a landscape which is so fast and so low MOQ based?
Yeah, sure. Again, there's different ways to skin this cat. I think the first thing that we have to talk about always is the supply chain that supplies us as the garment manufacturers or the apparel manufacturers. And anything that shortens the time that the raw material can be made available in is absolutely paramount to this. So, and it's a catch-22. Sometimes, the design expectations and the consumer markets push you away from that. But I think there has to be some element of standardization of material specifications that becomes important. Strengthening supply chains up and down, both on the raw material side and on the distribution side, are very important. I mean, a lot of brands have played with raw material staging models so that you can have materials available. Basically, anything that shortens the design period, the simplifying of the style constructions, product life cycle management systems that work effectively, that help us to bring product to life very quickly. And of course, the continued evolution of virtual prototyping. The other thing, of course, that we've had to think about as supply chain partners to brands and retailers is the market itself, and how do you get closer to the market, and what's the value of being closer to the market versus, let's say, sitting in Asia. And we and a lot of the larger companies have had to come up with multiple manufacturing origin locations, leveraging on not just being closer to markets. Sometimes it's to do with trade benefits and the like. So the physical location of your design development capabilities, the way you interact with your customers, and also the locations that you are all contributory to the end product, hopefully, that delivers the result that you're looking for.
Very interesting. So if I were to just summarize, and I think these are 4 very important points that you made, if factories and our esteemed guests who are here, who are in the industry, the 4 key things that you said you need to do to move towards a business model which is more suitable for this effervescent demand is something to do with raw material standardization, or making sure that you have raw material stock or whatever it may be. But raw material, if you're going to start from scratch, it is going to take time. So there needs to be some level of standardization there. The second piece you mentioned was strengthening distribution. because end of the day, if your distribution is weak and you're not able to reach the market in time, that's a problem. Third, you mentioned is virtual prototyping, because if you're not able to sample and prototype fast enough, that could be a problem. And the last one that you mentioned was being closer to the market, which maybe for the smaller players might not be easy initially, but could be a direction to move in, which is basically nearshoring to some extent. If you're delivering to Europe, maybe it's better to be around Eastern Europe or Turkey and set up your manufacturing there. So some of the direction or thoughts to look at. Very helpful. Thanks, Shirendra. Let's move on to COVID, right? COVID as an industry and sorry, my bad. COVID as a problem for the industry. This, as I mentioned earlier as well, brought the entire manufacturing industry to a standstill. Major problem that fashion industry faced, of course, was the fact that it was a non-essential, unlike a pharma or food or FMCG. It was a non-essential, so things couldn't even get shipped at times. If you can, please shed some light on how owners and leadership teams at factories should navigate through such adversities. COVID, fingers crossed, is almost over, but some things like this can happen again. So it would be great to get some sense of how to prepare for situations like this, if at all there is any preparation that is possible for these kind of situations.
Sure, Aadi. So I think first and most important, it's about what you do beforehand. Planning is everything, not just the way we make our products, how we plan our products, but how we plan our businesses. So I think having documented contingency plans in place for every aspect of the business. We just talked about the delivery solutions. We always took it for granted that the shipping routes would work and they would be part of our ecosystem. And with COVID, we've seen that everything you took for granted, has a potential negative side to it. So I think having documented contingency plans in place for every aspect of the business is really important. And at the same time, we also need to have a well-documented disaster recovery plan. So when something goes south, and it should cover multiple disaster possibilities. Who would have expected a virus to bring us to our knees? There were so many other things. So I think having a well-discovered, documented disaster recovery plan is in place. And in this, we must be mindful that we can have multiple risks at the same time. For example, if you take during COVID, which has obviously lasted for the better part of a couple of years, we've had monsoons, we've had floods, we've had all sorts of other things. So sometimes when your mind goes on one of them, it's difficult to forget the importance of another. So having the disaster recovery plan that covers multiple risks is important. And the other thing is, as leadership, to absolutely watch out for them coming. The signs are usually there. We tend to ignore them. Listen to your consumers, listen to the market, watch for the signs, and the moment you sense something is going to change, react. I remember coming out of the global financial crisis, Aadi, everybody said it'll never be like it used to be. We used to be used to growth and growth and growth, and it'll fall and it'll start. And we said from now on, it's just going to be a roller coaster. It's like going to be a sine wave. And that has absolutely come true. Now, when it happens, I think the most important thing is not to panic. That's number one as leaders. It's super important that you sit back and reflect. And first thing is, let's not forget, you're not alone. Everybody is dealing with this. So lots of people in your own geography or even globally are dealing with it. Set up a crisis leadership team. This is very important. Get 3, 4, 5, 6 of your leaders from across your group. If you're a bigger group, they don't have to be people who work together all the time. Set up a cadence for meeting. In the case of COVID, we met as a leadership team daily in the early days, and then it would become 2 to 3 times a week and eventually weekly. Establish priority work streams. Break it into manageable chunks, like we do in the business, and take response, which are different to your day-to-day responsibilities. So, for example, for me, one of the things that I had to look after in our when the crisis hit us was communication, because the group communication unit was a team that I worked very closely with. And we had to think about internal communication and external communication. So internal communication, for example, was about getting to our employees and communicating how to stay safe, how to protect yourself, your loved ones, managing the emotional and physical, mental health issues that you have, and so on. And then we got into town halls and making sure that we communicated what was good. So the moment we would have a leadership meeting that said, people are confused, they're hearing this, they're hearing that, let's have a town hall, let's communicate. and let them ask questions. Let's not try to hide behind anything. And so talking to employees and the impact of the pandemic was super important. And then, of course, there was the whole external piece, which was equally important, because at the same time as you look after your employees, you have to worry about your customers and how they're doing and what they're seeing of you. So we would discuss and agree as a leadership team as we went through what's happening on logistics, what's happening on this and that, what's happening in communication. And someone would say, I've got my customers asking me questions and I need to give them a party line. What's the party line? So as a communication team, what we would do is absolutely go through the detail of what we want to communicate, come up with a standard party line. Today you have to be honest. So it was about being authentic, honest, and factual, but managing it. So it provides confidence that we're in control, whatever the situation, and avoids consumer panic. So I think this is the way to do it. Have your teams and break it in manageable chunks and let each and everybody contribute to that. And individually, you can do a lot. That was it. So I think that's my advice about how you set up for it and how you deal with it when it hits you.
Wonderful. Thank you. I think just delving on that one point again, you see, situations like this would always lead to financial instability, right? You would probably have buyers canceling orders, brands asking for discounts. How do you deal with situations like those? And I know there's no right answer because you are probably stressed internally as well, but these external factors start becoming problematic. How do you draw that balance on the financial stability side?
So let me just talk about what we do internally first, and I'll touch on the customer's expectations. So the first thing is, like with every crisis, consider the worst possible outcome. And what we did, and I would strongly have recommended to anyone at the time, is assume that nothing is going to move. We're going to have no income for the next 2, 3, 4, 6 months. What are the consequences? How can you keep your head afloat? It's about survival of your employees on one hand and their health, and survival of the corporation, because if there's no corporation, you can't help anybody. And preserving cash is critical in a situation like that. So, review anything and everything that can put cash into the system that says if we have no income for a period of time, we stay liquid. And that involves drawing down on loans that might have not been drawn down on. Look at the payment terms with your suppliers, work with them on how you can do things, and even, and it's happened to me twice in my career, take pay cuts. And as a leadership, you do it right from the top and say, we'll take, let's say, a 50% pay cut at the top of the organization. And we expect as it cascades down for it to become 30%, 20%, so that, because we know that by the time you hit the people at the grassroots, they can't afford that. So we've avoided that at any count, but allowed it to be a cascade. And interestingly, the previous one, which was global financial crisis related, when things turn around, we were able to go back and give that money back, because generally you come out of these crises in a better place. Because if you survive, the competition may not have survived. The markets want to replenish their products. So we were able to do that. In the case of this one, we weren't able to do that, but we were able to come out of it after 8 to 9 months and say, look, we can restore salaries, and you go with it. So internally preserve cash. From the customer point of view, it's very much about understanding what their financial issues are. They're not asking you for help for no reason. They don't want to get stuck with stocks. They don't want to have product that's on the water landing that they can do nothing with. So you have to partner with them. There is an element of you have to partner with them. Try and take some of the pain as part of the partnership. See it as investment in the future. Because if you're with them when they're in a crisis, they will be with you when they come out of the crisis, and they will turn to you. But don't forget two important factors in it. Business lost may not be recovered. So hang on to it. So for us, it was like, keep the goods going out of the door. How do you keep the goods going out of the door when the port's ground to a standstill? You're manufacturing, but the port's not working because it's got hit with COVID. How do you get the product out? Work on that. Because the customer's okay. You can tell them anything you want, as long as the product keeps coming. So number one is don't lose business and make sure your customers kept happy. Number two is always remember, with every crisis will come opportunity. And that will come later, but watch out for it and be ready for it, because for sure it's a hockey stick. It's going to climb, and you've got to make sure. So that's my take. And partner with your customers, and hopefully a little bit of pain you take with them early will pay benefits when the hockey stick picks up.
Wonderful. No, thanks a lot for that. It's very insightful. I think because we have a time limit to this, and I think we have some interesting questions. I probably, Shirendra, try to ask you one last thing before we dive into the questions. You have an immense amount of experience working in the industry. It would be great to get some sense from you or some tips from you in terms of how did your management try to adapt to the changes over the last few years in terms of moving towards shorter lead times, labor upskilling, financial difficulties, etc., because you've seen it move over a few decades. So what were those things, or what were those milestones which are important, which people should try and keep in mind?
Okay, well, let me just talk about because you're back to the lead time question, and it's supply chain lead time. It just keeps coming up, whatever you look at. One of the things that we did was to say we always, over the years, you focused on innovation and design in that sort of supply chain partnership with the brands. But something we did probably a little different more recently was to look at the logistics and distribution side and figure out how can we do more in that space that will shorten lead times and add value to the offering that we give our customers. So one of the things we did was to set up a joint venture with a global logistics leader in Sri Lanka, our country, where we have the biggest part of our business. And through this, what we were able to do is to look at how do we bring in product, how do we offer the brands delivery solutions direct to the customer if that's what they want, the consumer if that's what they want. But through this, you see other opportunities. So for example, one particular opportunity that we leveraged on with one customer was where we looked at the lead time and the SKUs on a relatively straightforward product, but was ultimately coming to us as multiple SKUs because of geographical requirements. It could be packaging, it could be labeling. So what we did is through the logistics, because we now had a third-party logistics operation and a team that could manage that, what we would do is reduce the SKUs from, let's say, 8 to 1, where we don't label, we don't package, and we would bring the product in, manufactured product, get it ready to go out, other than that, and bring it to the warehousing location and hold it there. And then on a weekly basis, we could look at what the customer was out ordering for each geography based on their packaging requirements, their labeling requirements, any other final finishing. And we would then finish it at that point and ship it within 24, 48 hours. And this way, we could not just minimize the stock holding for both of us, we could take a lot of lead time out of the system. So that was something on that. And then again, we go back to consumer markets and getting closer. And another thing in the same space that we did was to set up a warehouse in North Carolina of our own. It was done to support our existing customers. But the funny thing was not just did it support our existing customers, but it gave us the opportunity to bring new customers in who were not prepared to work around the business models that we had on FOB. They're no longer interested in that. We want you to be working with us on delivery to distribution center. We want you to warehouse stock. So by adding these warehouse and logistics capabilities on both sides of the water, it changed the way we were positioned with our customer.
So why don't I pick up some of these questions for you, Mr. Shirendra, and would love to hear your views. I think one of the questions probably broadly answered, but because it is so important, I'll probably ask that again. And maybe if you can spend 60 seconds on this, how can factories collaborate with brands to meet erratic customer demands and streamline their supply chain in today's world? Ankit has asked this question.
Yeah, I mean, look, it depends a lot on your individual customer and how open they are to those partnerships. I've worked with brands where they will even get different supply chain partners to work together to provide solutions, or even whatever it is. So I think it does depend on the brand. It depends on the relationship that you have with the brand. If you're working with the brand through a buying office type arrangement, it becomes very difficult because you're working through an intermediary, and there's very little you can do. But if you have a direct relationship with the brand or a nominated agent of theirs and they partner with you, I think there's lots of opportunities to say, what can we do to help you? Tell us what your pain point is, and we will work with you to come up with solutions. But it depends on the partner, the brand. Aadi. Some are very open to it, and unfortunately, others are less so.
Got it. I think we have another question from Kate, and Kate is asking, what are the key skills that you will be looking for to enable the industry to adapt to the new normal? And the new normal is basically the post-COVID world is, I'm assuming, Kate, that's what you're asking for. But what are those key skills that you would be looking for to enable the industry to adapt to this new normal? Or maybe a few key skills there.
Well, look, strategic leadership is everything, right? You have to, it all starts at the top for us. Our teams expect us when there is a crisis to help them to navigate it and to give them the leadership and direction, show them the North Star and keep moving in that direction. I think I would say strategic leadership training is very important. For example, you need to know, even when something like this, how do we develop strategies, long range plans, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, and then something happens and you have to be able to say, put it on ice. Now we jump into survival mode. Survival is more than imper. There's no point worrying about diversifying our product range or looking at the new geographies to move into or expanding our business if we don't have a business. So the ability of strong leadership to pull together a leadership team and give strategic direction to those who work in the organization, giving them confidence that you know what you're doing and that they put their trust in you. So I think that's important. That's number one. We talked a lot about supply chain. I think investing in the supply chain is not a bad thing. If you're big enough or you're overly dependent enough, why not form a joint venture with a key strategic partner? Encourage them to come to your country or even to your factory. We have set up a number of partnerships where they're not financial partnerships, but we make commitments. We will do this much business if you will physically locate a stock at our location. So even whatever happens, you keep us going. So I would say strategic leadership and strategic partnerships, not just with your customers, but with your supply chain partners. I think that would be a snapshot.
I think very interesting. So I think if I were to very quickly summarize, and Kate, hope this answers your question. One is, of course, on the softer side, there needs to be training, a very strategic leadership training of sorts where, they understand, the leadership understands how do you adapt to situations like this, because the next thing that is going to happen after COVID will not be COVID. So there's no playbook for this, but strategic training on dealing with situations like this is one. The second, I think what you said is ability to go into survival mode. There are a lot of companies who do not have that ability and, are probably drawn by the idea of let's keep doing this and that and that and this. But ability to go into survival mode is an extremely important piece to be prepared for this new normal. And the last one, and I think extremely critical, is making the right supply chain investments. So I think those are the three key things Mr. Shirendra said. I think linked to that, and maybe we'll take two more questions, but linked to that, LB, I don't know the full name, but LB has asked, manufacturing units are slowly starting to find their financial footing post-COVID, which is correct. How should they plan for automation investment? I think it's a very important question. She keeps coming up that, now we are finding that footing, but now where do I invest? Do I really need to invest in automation? Do I need to invest in something else? Because, now it doesn't seem like automations are that critical because COVID is gone. So how should people plan for that investment?
Look, automation in the manufacturing piece is very product and customer specific. If you're making T-shirts and you're churning them out year after year, day after day, you can automate the whole process. It's worth investing in automation. If like most of us, you're fashion led and you're dealing a lot with complex changes of designs and so on, it becomes much more challenging. Our ethos all along is to automate, and this term automate comes completely from lean thinking, Toyota, and the like. And what it's really saying is don't think about a machine coming in and just taking over from a human being. Don't go that way. Think about what can you do to make the human being work better. So focus on taking out non-value adding repetitive tasks and incorporating them into some sort of semi-automation. So automate, don't go crazy. And we found a lot of this comes from internal. You don't have to go out there and get too sophisticated. I mean, sure, there are robotics and all that stuff that's available and they have their place. But taking a simple operation And we find in Asia in particular, the skill level is very high. The education standards of sometimes the technical people on the mechanics, you just give it to the guys on the shop floor and say, what do you think? How can I do this? And they'll come up with something clever. So don't think high tech, and you just buy a couple of little actuators and something, stick a little bit of pneumatics on it and a little programmable timer. And for relatively low cost, you can do something to make the process a little easier for the employer. You can take a little bit of skill out of it, which also is a good thing these days, to make it so that you can be consistent, and yet at the same time take the setup costs out of it as well. So my advice is do very limited automation. If you're a smaller factory, lean on your teams in the factory. It creates such a buzz. And set up a little automation room in your factory. Tell them, have little video things, record what they do, give a lot of credit to people, recognition, have an awards. We're going to have an automation award at the end of the year. And we want people to come up with something and see it through. Most importantly, see it through.
Wonderful. I think so. A couple of you probably touched on a couple of other questions which were asked by Naina and Saib, which was actually specifically on this upskilling question, and then does that lead to a problem with employment generation? So I think to your point, there has to be like the right kind of intersection, because automation should not mean that people are losing their job. What it should mean that they are being upskilled to sort of operate those automated systems, right? So I guess that's how you are sort of describing this.
Okay. Do more with the same, right?
Yes.
Because, so if we say we're all looking to grow, nobody in life is going to stay still, right? So this is something we have to be mindful. If you think I'm at the scale and size I want to be, I'm just going to do the same thing every day, you will not be relevant in a few years' time. So that doesn't work. And you certainly won't attract the best talent, because today's young talent at every level wants to see progress. They want to move on. They have access to technology. They will not be around. So you want to, so go with the ethos of, we are going to be doing more, 10% more, 15% more, 20% more next year, but we're going to do it with the same number of people.
Yeah.
And then move some investment, assign investment, do Shark Tank type things. We've done that as well. As we'll say, let's just have a Shark Tank thing, make it fun. Like everything, make it fun, make it interesting. You know what the next generations are looking for. They're not looking to do it the way they want to do. They want to participate. They want to be recognized. So I would say have competition. It comes to the same thing. But yeah, keep it at homegrown. Keep it homegrown.
Got it. I think one of the good examples I can give here is to Saib, who's asked this question a couple of times, is that when we look at a software or a product like Zilingo Factory, for example, Zilingo Factory is not replacing the quality control manager. What it is doing is it is enabling him to do better. So if he was doing X amount of work or ensuring that the wastage is reduced by Y dollars manually, Zilingo Factory would probably enable him to reduce wastage by Y plus dollars, right? So what that could mean for him is, one, he or she is improving his or her skill set, but also generating better dollars for the organization. So I think the idea of technology or automation is not to replace humans, but improve their skill levels to produce better for the organization and the ecosystem. So moving on, last question, I would say, Shirendra, and probably a little tough one here. So Deepak has asked this question. With the raw material prices becoming challenging in Sri Lanka, right? Specifically with the geopolitical situation there, and it could happen due to other reasons as well, right? With the Xinjiang cotton prices situation happened in China, the raw material prices have been fluctuating. How do you hedge as a factory against these kind of fluctuations? Because end of the day, a fabric or the textile price is gonna dictate the price of your final product as well.
It's a great question, and I think it's relevant to everybody. Not just to. I mean, Sri Lanka has its own issues at the moment, and those are probably less impacted by this situation because it's more to do with local currency, and therefore, if you're in the international market and you're buying raw material in dollars and selling your product in dollars or whatever the euros, you're somewhat insured. But I think the point here, Aadi, is that if you are quoting a true FOB price to your customer from day one, and you have taken the responsibility for securing the raw material at a certain price, it does put you in a very challenging position, because then you have to go back to your customer and explain to them that you've had these challenges. And it's not an easy one to navigate. But most of the bigger brands today have much more transparency on the costing system. I mean, there are very few brands I know that are completely, here's, you know, in the old world of here's a product, price it and give it to me. Because the development is an integrated process, right? Because even the material development is very much part of the product development, and you partner in this. So in such situations, the brand is privy to the changes that are happening. They know what's going on. And if you, again, have some sort of a partnership with your customers, it comes back again to a partnership of some sorts. You're usually in a position to be able to say to them, this is what has happened. We need you to share the pain just as much as we share the pain. And again, depending on the customer that you work with, they will react differently. I've had situations where the customers have said, not just on price, but delivery, you know, it's your problem. You deal with the supplier. And I would say, but you nominated the supplier. And I went to them and you negotiated the price and they want more, or they're not prepared to give my delivery in time. How does that become my problem? And I think in such situations, you just have to be logical and fair in what you say. I know of brands and retailers that are much more open to partnering. They know that they're not trying to kill you as a customer, as a supplier. They know we run on small margins. The costing systems today are relatively transparent, and everybody knows you're on let's call it mid-single digit margins. If you're doing a really good job, maybe a high single digit, and if you're in a very, very privileged position, you just jump to double digit. So you can't afford to take a hike that's anything other than a very, very simple hike. So normally the brands would then understand that that is necessary. There's some negotiation, and that's the way it goes. By the way, I wanted to add one thing to something you were talking about just before that. You were talking about, you know, systems like your own systems and coming in, and one of the things that's very important, that is it error proofs things, and it makes information available. So we should not forget that what this does is any information that you can make available at the point that you're doing the work, and then it can carry to simplified dashboards that go to management, enables, and if the information, the accuracy of the information is good, it makes a world of difference to the productivity of everything you do. So whether it's the systems that you implement on the shop floor, whether it is the PLM systems that drive the development process, all of these systems add a lot more efficiency that people may not be mindful of. And most importantly, as I said, they take the human error factor, they reduce the risk of human error, which is there on repetitive tasks.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Shirendra. I think we have a few more questions, but we can go on and on. What I've requested the participants is they can send the questions to Anuj on his email, anuj.george@zilingo.com, and we will try our best to get these questions answered. But it was a wonderful, wonderful chat. Thank you so much for your time. I also see that the attendees have pretty much stayed the same where we started, so it wasn't boring. And thank you so much for everyone's interest, for being here, and I hope everyone got to learn something from you. Over to you, Anuj. So this is pretty much from my end, Shirendra's side.
From my side, yes, by all means, if you send us the questions, we'll take a look at it. And if you send us an email address and it's something that you want to have a conversation about, if it's something we can even perhaps connect directly on that. So happy to have been there. Thanks very much. Thank you very much, Aadi.
Anuj, you're on mute.
Yeah, this had to happen definitely. Thank you everyone for being present and making this session a success. So as we said, this is the first fireside chat that we had today, and very soon we'll be having the second one, which is the topic for which is the time travel to the future of apparel manufacturing, and we'll be having CEO of TAL Group, Mr. Roger Lee, come on that chat as well. So please look out for the registrations for that as well, and hoping to ensure that we continue these sessions on a more periodic manner, and hopeful of giving more insights and more value to the industry in this time period. Thank you so much once again, and hoping to see you soon on the other Fireside Chat soon. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.